When Ethan's grandfather passed away, he didn't leave behind a fortune or a sprawling estate for his grandson. No, what Ethan received was much stranger. Tucked inside a small, velvet pouch was an old, gold-cased pocket watch. It was a peculiar thing. The glass was cracked, and the hands ticked backward. Ethan had never been particularly close to his grandfather. The old man was a recluse, always secretive, his presence as mysterious as the perpetually locked attic in his house. While the rest of the family inherited jewelry, money, and property, Ethan was left with this strange timepiece. A faded handwritten note was tucked beside it. Daunty winded unless you were ready to lose something. Ethan let out a dry chuckle. How typical. Still, the craftsmanship was intriguing. He placed it on his desk, more as a curiosity than anything else, and promptly forgot about it. That night, sleep wouldn't come. The city outside was a low, distant hum, a familiar lullaby that usually worked its magic. But tonight, something was different. A new sound cut through the silence. Tick, tick. It was faint, almost imperceptible. Ethan sat up, his eyes darting to the desk. Pocket watch. The second hand was moving, sweeping counterclockwise with an unnerving steadiness. With every tick, the air in the room seemed to grow colder, heavier. Each sound stretched, pulling time along with it, distorting the very fabric of the moment. It decayed up. The second hand was now spinning wildly backward. A chill ran down his spine. He glanced at his digital clock on the wall. Las 2:37 AM. A moment later, it blinked. 2:36 AM. Then 2:35. It wasn't a glitch. Time itself was reversing. The next morning, Ethan woke up feeling disoriented. Etho had woken up early, but his phone displayed yesterday's date. His inbox, which he'd cleared the night before, was suddenly full of unread emails, all marked as new. He needed a reality check, so he called his best friend, Noah. "Hey, did you call me last night?" Ethan asked, his voice trembling slightly. Noah just laughed on the other end of the line. "Dude, what are you talking about? Didn't we already talk about this yesterday?" Ethan's heart sank. He had no memory of that conversation. He looked at the pocket watch. The hands were still frozen at 11:59. As he held it close, he could hear something else. A faint, almost inaudible whispering seemed to emanate from within, like a distant crowd murmuring underground. The days that followed were a cascade of subtle strangeness. Little things were out of place. The new neighbors who had just moved in next door were suddenly gone, and the old family was back, waving at him from their lawn as if they'd never left. The trendy new coffee shop on the corner had reverted to the old, dusty convenience store he remembered from his childhood. Then came the most disturbing change. One morning, while looking in the mirror, he noticed he looked younger. The faint lines around his eyes were gone. His face looked less tired, more like it did a few years ago. Panic finally began to claw its way up his throat. He checked the date on his phone again. It wasn't just a day or two anymore. It was 2 years earlier. In a desperate haze, he drove to his mother's house, praying she could make sense of it all. When she opened the door, she let out a sharp gasp, her hand flying to her mouth. "Ethan, oh, my goodness, you look just like you did before the accident." Accident? What accident? He didn't know what she was talking about. His mind was a blank. That night, a strange compulsion led him back to his grandfather's house, to the one place he was never allowed to go. The attic. After jimmying the lock, he found himself surrounded by dust and forgotten memories. In a corner, he found a stack of old newspapers. He pulled one from the top, and the headline made his blood run cold. "Local teen Ethan Miller survives fatal car crash minus 2019. The photograph showed a younger, paler version of himself, covered in scars and bandages, barely recognizable. But when he looked at his own arms, his own face, in a dusty mirror, there were no scars. The watch hadn't just turned back time. It had taken him to a point before the trauma, erasing it from his body, and slowly, from his memory. He tore through the attic, searching for answers, for anything that could explain this temporal nightmare. In a dusty leather trunk, he found it. His grandfather's journal. The entries were sporadic, written years, sometimes decades, apart. Each one described the horrifying power of the watch. An early entry read, "Every time I wind the watch, I lose a day of my life. A memory fades." Another, years later, "Every turn takes me backward. But something else comes forward. A void is filled, and a more frantic one. It doesn't rewind time. It replaces Italiano. It eats the years to keep itself going." On the very last page, the handwriting was a panicked, barely legible scrawl. If you ever hear it ticking by itself, it's too late. It's hungry. That night, Ethan's dreams were a chaotic storm. He was standing alone in a vast, dark field under a starless sky. The only sound was the relentless ticking of the watch. But it wasn't a tiny click. It was a deafening thunder that shook the very ground beneath his feet, echoing through his bones. He jolted awake, his heart pounding against his ribs. On the nightstand, the pocket watch was glowing with a faint, sickly green light, and it was ticking. Backward. Again, he grabbed his phone, his hands shaking so violently he could barely hold it. The date displayed was 2017. He looked around his room in horror. The photos on his wall, pictures of friends and family from the past few years, were vanishing one by one, fading into blank paper. The memories attached to them dissolved from his mind like smoke. He snatched the watch, his voice raw with terror. "Stop. Please, just stop." But his plea only seemed to fuel it. The ticking grew louder, faster, accelerating into a ferocious, deafening storm of sound that filled the entire room, the entire world. And then, silence. An absolute, profound silence that was more terrifying than the noise. He looked around. Everything was gone. The furniture, the walls, the colors, all of it had dissolved into a gray, empty void. Dust motes hung suspended in the motionless air. Only the pocket watch remained, lying in the center of the nothingness. Its cracked, glassed face had fallen away, and inside, where the intricate gears and springs should have been, there was something else. A tiny, glistening human eye. It stared directly at him, unblinking. Then, slowly, it blinked once, and time started again. Backward. They say that time heals all wounds, but some clocks don't measure time, they feed on Italiano. And if you ever find yourself holding one, and you hear it start ticking backward, it's not counting the hours. It's already counting you down. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more content like this. We'll see you in the next one.